Welcome back to Tutorial Tidbits and welcome to my channel. I'm Elizabeth St. Hilaire, and this week I have been experimenting with feathers on the gel plate. They're not as messy as flowers or plant material, and you can use them over and over again. And what I did was I combined them with a stencil for a layering of unique and interesting patterns. So if you have a few minutes, let's go check it out. In this lesson, I want to teach you or show you how to combine the craft feathers with a stencil pattern. So this is one of my designs for joggles. It is reminiscent of Punchinella, and it's part of my patterns for layering collection. All of the patterns for layering stencils have small patterns in them, and they're meant to be layered with stencils with larger openings in them. But I chose one with small openings for the feather lesson because I thought it would be a nice contrast to have a small pattern to these large shapes. And so this continuous circle pattern that will be reminiscent of Punchinella, I thought would be a nice background shape to go with the craft feather shapes, okay? So all of these feathers, the different varieties of them, they all came out of the package that is on the supply list from Amazon. You can certainly find them other places, but I personally really like to shop online. So the first thing that I'm going to do is use Titan Green Pale. I'm gonna do a base layer, but the other color, the medium color I'm using is Pyrrole Orange, and the dark color that I'm using is Van Dyke Brown. So my base layer, actually, I'm going to flip these colors around. Maybe. No. All right. Just bear with me. Sometimes I change the plan midstream, and that is the fun part about gel printing, is that there's no order or nothing set in stone that has to be done or can't be experimented with. Okay. Making sure my brayer's clean off to the side on a clean sheet of paper. And so the first thing I'm going to do is create myself a solid color base layer in that Titan Green Pale. Okay, so we've got a nice Titan Green Pale sheet, and we've pulled off most of the paint from the plate. That's what I love about this rice paper. And then I'm going to brayer color through the stencil onto the plate. And to do that, I am going to brayer the color off to the side on a smaller gel plate. So I've got a 5x7 gel plate that I'm going to use as a palette. So the next color is going to be the Pyrrole Orange. I'm going to put that on the palette so that I can apply it to the brayer. So I want to get it evenly coated over the brayer. I'm going to set this off to the side. And then I'm using the brayer to push the color through the stencil. So we want to get a nice thin layer of color all the way through the stencil pattern on the whole surface of the plate. I think that looks good. There, we have a nice dotted surface. We're going to let this dry, and then the next thing I'm going to do is brayer a second color over that. I think the Van Dyke Brown is actually going to be too dark. It's going to absorb those orange dots, so I need to come up with a color that won't absorb the dots. So I've decided to try Naples Yellow. It's also an opaque color, much like the Titan Green Pale. So we'll see what happens. It's not going to eat up the orange for sure, and hopefully it will be a harmonious color. And then I'm going to arrange my feathers and print. So we're going to lift this, and wow, that looks really neat. And then quickly remove the feathers, and hopefully we can get some of that vein detail into the feather shapes. So yeah, we've even got some feather in the feather shapes, but we get a little bit of vein detail and a little bit of polka dot pattern coming into the feather shapes. Then we've got this fun pattern, and I think I'm going to pull that with, normally I wipe this off, but that's fun. I still have a little bit of color in my brayer, so we'll see how that affects this. But we'll pull this print. There we go. That's not only is it going to clean the plate, but it's going to give us a fun layer for another sheet of collage paper, if nothing else. Okay, so now we're going to use the ghost print of the feathers in the darker color. So now I am going to come to the Van Dyke Brown. This is a nice dark rich color. It's a neutral dark rich color, so it's not a warm brown. It's kind of a cool brown. So it goes with warm colors as well as cool colors. I use it to darken a lot of my colors. And I feel as though as a color, it works well within a cool color palette or a warm color palette because it's pretty neutral. So we got that cleaned off. Now we're going to keep in mind the composition of where we have the feathers from the first print. It's hard for me to show you that without untaping it, but they were mostly up here in this area. So this time I'm going to focus them kind of slightly off to the opposite side. These ones I particularly like with the long stems. So we'll put these like that. Get that one like that. Like that. So then we're going to take our tissue. I'm just going to use my tissue to pull this print to create a ghost print. So I need a little bit more cleanup in here. I can remove a little bit more paint. And so I've picked up my feather there accidentally. So we'll remove the rest of them. And then we'll bring our print over and apply the ghost prints. So now we have the ghost prints on top of the first prints. That's a really nice combination. And I think that I'm going to go for one more layer of ghost prints. So this time I'm going to switch up the color. I'm going to use magenta. And I've still got some Van Dyke Brown in my brayer, so it's going to darken that magenta just a little bit. So I'm going to swirl that around to blend it together and roll it out. So it's a bit darker than a straight up magenta, which I think will work because we want it to stand up over the orange. I'm going to switch feathers and use something totally different. I'm going to put it over here, over there. And again, I'm going to remove the excess paint with the tissue so that I can take advantage of the ghost print. So that we can have a good ghost print. So we'll lift up the feathers. And then we'll bring back our hinged paper and print. So now I've added the magenta feathers to the composition on the other side. And I've got this really nice print of feathers with polka dots. So that's how you can combine a stencil with ghost prints and multiple layers of feathers for some fun combinations. So I hope that you are inspired by this week's video. I think that you should experiment with all kinds of different feathers. I got mine on Amazon, but I'm sure you can get them in other places. And, you know, everything that I've learned about gel printing has been through experimentation. Whether I have failed or succeeded, I always learn something. So anyway, happy Friday. Thanks for being here, and I'll see you back here next week.